Before we get to your questions, we've got a few samples to look at, and you have a creepy insect. I'm sorry, Wayne, but go right ahead.
Oh, that's fine. Everybody has their own view, Kim.
Yes.
I brought with me tonight a sample that came into the office. I have in my left hand here, I have the male wood cockroach. And in my hand, I have a live, immature one, which I think is going to be a male because it has the wing pads. The females are wingless. These are occasional home invaders. They do hang out a lot in mulches, especially wood mulches around the house. They like damp wood areas. This one just happened to come from a house that had some shower problems and had a wet underneath it. Typically, they do not do very well inside at all. And the best thing to do is just take care of the damp that you have in those areas where you have leaking water, also how you get carpenter ants. So nothing to really worry about, but definitely something interesting and to maybe gross out a lot of the rest of the panel with tonight. And
right.
Zach is going to show something that I brought from him that he promised 2 weeks ago would be here tonight.
Yes, yes.
Which is wonderful. We listen to people.
Yes, and we appreciate it. And this is what happens when you ask an entomologist to bring in a fresh sample. And so this was only harvested, I don't know, months ago.
I was being efficient with resources, Zach.
But yes,
I picked it on Monday.
But you do get points for the bucket. So very nice. So this is wing dock or veiny dock, and this was got this picture a couple weeks ago and essentially stumped me. Didn't stump the panel, but stumped me. And common along roadsides, north and west of here, far west. It's a perennial, spreads by rhizomes. I don't know if you can get that, but that's a good shot of a rhizome. Has buds all the way along it, so every one of those buds can create a new plant. And so veiny dock, wing dock gets orangish, pinkish flowers, and right now those have fallen off on Wayne's sample, his fresh sample, and now you see seeds from that, and so.
Well, show them the actual wings ones.
You can hardly see the wings because they're not bad. That's not bad. And the entomologist, again, is the weed person. So, again, this is what happens when you have an entomologist bring in a weed. Thanks, Wayne.
Hey, you promised.
I think thank to somebody, but I'm not sure who. Okay, Amy, we're going to be really happy to get that one over and done with.
Zach is ready to hurl over next to me. I just happily picked these maybe an hour ago in a home lawn here in Lincoln. We talk about stinkhorns a lot. They're usually small and red, but this is another form of stinkhorn. It's just a larger version of it. And all this green, gray mass, wet stuff, that's all the spores, and it really stinks associated with it. This one's all moved by flies. But the part that most people call and talk to us about is when they're digging in their yard or in their garden is they find these little jello egg things. And this is what the stinkhorn actually comes out of. This is, if you cut it open, you'll be able to see the cap of the mushroom in there, but they're pretty gelatinousy. You can see my fingers are pretty gooey, but that's what you're gonna find when they first emerge. And like this one that still has the cap on is only probably maybe an hour and a half old. It's a very young little mushroom. They only last a day and then they'll disappear, but they stink really bad too. Man. So.
Yes,
stinkhorns.
for the people who are watching, we have a lot of people trying to get out of their chairs.
This show is under protest.
Thanks,
Bad
Amy.
samples, smelly samples, under protest.
All right, Elizabeth, you have something beautiful and unfortunately not fragrant.
I know. I wish it was fragrant because those stinkhorns, luckily I can't smell them for some odd reason, so I'll be all right. What I have are some different penstemons. To start off, this dark one is called Dark Towers. It's one of the ones that's been bred by UNL, by Dell Lindgren. If you look at it, you might notice that it's fairly similar to one called Husker Red. The main difference between this one and Husker Red is Husker Red has pure white flowers. And so the dark foliage is really stunning, the flowers are really stunning, they do their show, and then they turn into these lovely capsules that are pretty interesting, the seed pods. This one is actually a shell leaf penstemon. I know by Grand Island and in my area, our shell leaf penstemon in the road ditches is just blooming to beat the band. But today I couldn't find more than one bloom on this one. But it does have a really nice lavender foliage or flower on it, and then those capsules will ripen and then they'll pop open and then you can spread the seeds that way. So, you know, Dark Towers penstemon is a really nice one. The shell leaf penstemon is one of our native penstemons that does really well too.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think Dale also did some work on shell leaf penstemon. There's Prairie Splendor series and one called War Axe. So beautiful in comparison to stinkable. All right, Wayne, you get the first image tonight. We have a lot of viewers who have garden phlox, the tall garden phlox, and they're having phlox plant bugs. So do you want to talk a little bit about the beastie and what to do about him?
All right, well, the one pictured here is an adult. Here's the damage that you will typically see on phlox. When you start to see the damage, or you start to see the nymphs, which are smaller orange and they've got some black wing pads on them, when you see those, then you know you have to maybe spray, because there's not a lot you can do. You can use insecticidal soaps. Permethrin works well. Acephate also works well. If you have a history with phlox plant bug, what you need to do is go through and practice sanitation in the fall. Phlox plant bug lays its eggs in the stem. So if you clean out the old stems, get them in the compost pile, maybe not the best, but definitely get them out of your yard, maybe get them out to the waste collection site that does compost, and you can get rid of them that way.
Excellent, good advice. Mine are absolutely covered this year. All right, Zach, you have a viewer who has a question about a lawn weed that came in, and I believe they sent us some pretty good pictures of this one, and they want to know what to do about it.
Yeah, that one's fairly common at this time of year. This is a corn speedwell, and it's a winter annual, and so it germinated last fall, probably last September or October. Germinates last fall, survives the winter nicely, and then it greens up in the spring, and it's throwing a seed head right now. And so probably will die off here with a little bit of heat, another week or maybe a month. It might hang around. Best way to control it is a thick turf. Anything you can do to have a thick turf, fall fertilization, and mowing high, the standard cultural things we talk about. And then these are a prime example of why we like to spray broadleaf herbicides in late September, October time frame, is that it not only does it pick up the perennials like clover and dandelion, also picks up the winter annuals like corn speedwell.
All right, thank you, Zach. Amy, we have several people with questions about flowering crab apples and actually fruiting apples as well. This particular viewer is in Bellevue. They don't know the age of the tree, budded out, bloomed beautifully, has fruit on the branches with healthy leaves, but then it's got this going on. The bark is shriveled and they snap, the twigs snap, and they're wondering, what is this? And I think we have a second viewer or some other images of kind of the same thing, of crab apples that don't have much going on.
This is really most likely a combination of several things going on. With them cracking and breaking really easy. The drought last year was just notorious on all of our trees. We had a lot of dieback because of the drought. But we also, if you're seeing that bark shrinking up a little bit, it's most likely some fungal cankers that moved in because of the stress from the drought. The trees weren't able to handle it, made them a lot more susceptible. So we're seeing a lot of dieback from canker development from last spring, last summer, and then the continued drought that we saw throughout the winter months, we're still seeing some of that dieback. And the big problem with that drought that we had last year, we've been getting great rains now, but we're going to be seeing those effects of the drought for the next 1 to 3 years, if not possibly longer. We're going to see dieback depending on what those trees had in reserve. So if you can, we're going to prune when it is appropriate time to prune out those trees. That last image where that crab apple was pretty much had no foliage, I really doubt the tree's going to come back. You're going to want to be looking at replacing it this fall with some other tree species in that landscape area.
All right, thank you, Amy. Excuse me. Elizabeth, this is a viewer from North Platte, and they ordered some seeds online for a red dye amaranth, which is kind of fun. Last year they were getting established. This year they're filling in nicely, but this is not Hopi red dye red amaranth. They want to know what it is, and is it a weed, or what should they do?
And they're correct, it is not an amaranth. What it is more than likely the Chinese lantern. And the cool part about the Chinese lantern is that seed head. And what happens is after the flower sets on, it makes this really pretty, papery, orange kind of lantern on it. That's really stunning, and it works really well for dried flower arrangements and things like that. So it's not a total loss, but it's not the plant that they wished it was.
Yeah. All right, you ready for the next picture, Wayne?
Let's go for it.
This is actually a Sutton viewer, and they found these on their ash leaves, and they wonder what they are. They've never seen these before, and they haven't really seen them in the entire tree. They're just sort of intrigued with what this is.
All right. These look like a gall. These particular ones are caused by a midge. For an entomologist, we call them Cecidiomyidae. Means nothing to most people. It's just a family of midges. Most of them, that's where a lot of the flies that cause galls on plants come from. One of the more famous ones is the pinecone gall on willows that you see further west.
Right, so nothing they should do.
If you're worried about it, just pluck it out and throw it away.
Okay, excellent. Good advice. All right, you also have a question about ID from another viewer who found this, which you have both a sample of and we have a picture of.
Yep.
And growing in a turf situation, they want to know what it is and what to do about it.
Yeah, this is, I've seen this one all over this year, and this is probably a function of the drought last year and lots of damage. This is little barley, and I don't know how close you can get here on the camera, but this is little barley. This is a winter annual, and so it germinated last fall and survived the winter, and right now it's throwing a seed head, and it's going to be, again, dying in the next few weeks to a month, depending on the heat, and really a fairly attractive seed head, and this guy's pretty tough. It's, the leaf blades are very tough, and the seed heads are tough, and so when it's mowed, you get a ripping, similar to what I mentioned a couple weeks ago on the seed heads. You get a ripping, don't get a very clean cut. Winter annual, so the best thing you can do for this guy is maintain a dense turf. Again, high mowing, fall fertilization will help you. In the worst case scenario, a pre-emergent herbicide applied in the fall would help take care of this. If you see it early in the spring, the glove of death or spot spraying with Roundup would be one thing. But easily the best thing to do is just maintain a really thick turf, and you'll really limit this guy.
Or in the case of our colony out by our building, just sort of enjoy it.
Just sort of enjoy it. It's got a great, I haven't seen it. This is a banner year for little barley.
Okay, thanks, Zach. Amy, this is also a banner year for shrooms. And this one is a picture, fortunately, so it doesn't smell like that last thing. This is a viewer who found these at Indian Cave State Park near the blacksmith shop, actually. They were as big as a plate, and they want to know what they are. They look like flowers.
They do look like flowers. It's a gorgeous picture. These are actually hen of the woods, and this is actually an edible mushroom. Very tasty, and with them being that large of a plate, you could eat them for a month. You harvest them and you keep them in the refrigerator. The trick is, like Lauren pointed out with the morel segment that he did a few weeks back, if you collect mushrooms like that, don't put them in a plastic bag to store them, because you're going to get other fungi that could make you sick grow on them. So you're going to store them in paper bags or just in the refrigerator themselves. But hen of the woods, very gorgeous. The moisture that we've been having, especially in that part of the state, is what really helped promote them and flourish so well.
Excellent, thank you. All right, Elizabeth, we have actually two identification pictures. They're the same plant from different places. One's from Washington County, the other is from Wahoo. This particular one, though, is Washington County. They want to know what the tree is, a lot of dead branches. They vary, and a lot of them look like these, and they want to know what to do to help that tree.
What that is it's an ash, more than likely probably green ash. And there's the healthy foliage right there. There's about 5 leaflets per leaf, and it's a compound leaf on there. Now, if you're noticing the curling, the cupping, it could potentially be herbicide injury to that plant. Also, you're going to look at the overall health of the tree. If you've got a lot of twig dieback, it could be related to the drought. If it's really thin, it could be related to the drought as well. So you want to kind of look at the overall health of the tree. In terms of those that were hit by herbicide, there's not a lot that you can do. Just watch the tree, make sure that you maintain good watering on that tree so it doesn't become drought stressed and more susceptible to insects and diseases.
All right, Wayne, we have a question here from somebody in Lincoln who has a history of termites. Currently, they're not active. But they want to know whether termite bait programs with an active ingredient that I'm not even going to try to pronounce are a worthwhile defense for long-term protection, and they want to know any information we could provide to help them make that decision. So you pronounce it.
Right. The active ingredient in question is called diflubenzuron. It acts as a chitin synthesis inhibitor, and what that does to the insect, the primary protein component of their exoskeleton is chitin. They can't synthesize it, So when they try to molt, they have a really bad molt. They're structurally not sound. They can't work. And also, because they use a lot of small fungi and yeasts and things like that in their midgut, it does also mess with the fungi because they use chitin in their cell walls. So it does work, and it would work. And they would pass that around because they practice something called anal trophallaxis.
And on that note, we have a question for Zach. It's quite a night on Backyard Farmer.
I thought the show started off bad, but now it's gone really bad.
It's insects, Zach. What can we say?
Scientific term.
Okay, so Zach, your question is actually about pineapple weed,
Oh, dandy.
dandy, and this is actually in a pasture, but I think this is also a plant that occurs in landscapes on occasion. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a pretty common plant. I see it in places that are really thin turf, and I think we might have a picture of it. I'm not sure if you're going to show it up, but it's a fairly thin leaf plant, multiple petals on that leaf, and the seed head is a yellow seed head that looks exactly like a pineapple, hence the name. And so, again, it's a summer annual, and so it fills in areas right now. It's going to be with us now for a little bit, for another 2 or 3 months. Control of these guys are pretty tough, especially in a pasture, because you got to have all these feeding restrictions. Again, the denser the turf you can get it, the better off you are, depending on the animal, depending on what how often you have animals feeding out there. You might be able to take the animals off for a while, then treat it with a typical broadleaf herbicide labeled for pastures, and then put them back on after whatever the waiting period is. It's a summer annual tough one.
All right, thank you, Zach. Amy, this is a viewer in Archer, Nebraska, near Central City. They have about a 6-year-old cottonwood, appears to be quite healthy, but it also is oozing clear sap from a portion of the tree. They think it's a condition called wetwood, and they want to know, are they right, and if so, what can they do about that?
Okay, wetwood is actually a canker inside the heartwood, and as the fungus grows, it will produce a liquid. A lot of times with cottonwoods, we'll start to actually see them oozing when we have too much water. We've had all these wonderful rains, so it's almost too much water, and so they're releasing some water that way. Best thing, leave it alone. Don't touch the tree. Don't try to remove it. You're going to probably see some ants because there's a lot of sugars associated with it or other insects around it, but they're not going to hurt anything. The big thing is don't park your car underneath it because it'll leave really sticky, gooey stuff on your car and it's hard to get off. But otherwise, just let it be.
All right, thank you, Amy. It's kind of the other side of wet. We have probably a dry one here, Elizabeth. This is a Pender viewer. They have Harry Lauder's walking stick, and it's a big one. Several years old, it's been doing very well. They only have 2 or 3 branches that still have foliage on them. They're wondering, is there any way to save it, or do we start over with one that's that thin?
And I think they did send a picture, and it was pretty thin, and it was kind of starting to leaf out. The main thing is to wait for it to leaf out completely because the leaves in the picture were still fairly young. If you wanted to prune out the dead, you can prune out the dead, but there's not going to be much there because it was very thin. It's up to you whether or not you try to remove it or if you leave it there. You can always see how it overwinters, but again, it was pretty much going to be like a drought issue because it did have a lot of twig dieback, a lot of death on that one. So it's going to be a waiting game, and again, the decision's up to you whether you remove it. It's just going to be a little sickly for a while.
Okay, and I think one of the things for them also to keep in mind would be to watch for the straight canes, right?
Yep, because Harry Lauder's walking stick has contorted twigs on it, and so if you prune it too heavily or prune it wrong, it will have wild hairs that go straight and stick up.
Exactly. All right, thanks, Elizabeth. All right, Wayne, this is a viewer who has for the past 3 years been terrorized by, they're saying cicadas. It's probably cicada killers, I
That would
think.
be my guess if they're being terrorized.
They've set up housekeeping right at the front door, both sides of the sidewalk, and then they fly right into the people. Nobody's been stung, and they actually quote Fred, as Fred saying these are part of nature's wondrous pageantry, but they're wondering how to get them to move on permanently.
Well, yes, I'll start with they are most likely cicada killers.
Okay.
They are not very aggressive, and that's why they'll fly into people and not sting. One of the things that I'll recommend if you really want to have exercise piece out of this is take your tennis racket out, and you can swat them down with that, and then you can stomp on them if you want some exercise and you're brave enough to do it. Otherwise, this is going to get back to Zach's maintain a healthy turf, maintain thick grass. They're less likely to dig into those areas, especially if it's along a sidewalk. It makes it harder. But get it covered up. You can always sprinkle some 7 or carbaryl into the tunnels
If you
to
need
help.
to. All right. Thank you. Tennis racket. Okay. Zach, this is a viewer who wants to know, and this is in Ottawa, Iowa. They want to know if there is any product that will prevent tree seeds from sprouting. They sprout everywhere, flower gardens, everything else. They've tried preen. Do you know of anything that will keep them from actually sprouting?
The tree seeds are broadleaves, and so most of our pre-emergent herbicides are designed for crabgrass, and so they're not nearly as effective for that. Again, we get questions a lot about preen, and preen is a brand name. It's not an active. They have different active ingredients, and so the one active ingredient that I would look for is called isoxaben, and it's the only pre-emergent herbicide. Sorry, I don't have it for the screen, but it's isoxaben. It's the only pre-emergent herbicide that's labeled for broadleaf weeds, and so those trees would be considered broadleaf weeds. That might be the best the best chance of knocking those out pre-emergently.
All right.
Again, if it's in a garden, that herbicide will also affect
Everything else.
everything else.
Okay. All right, Wayne, you get the next picture. This is a really cool one. This viewer sent this in last week and just was intrigued by it. She did say that they have now moved on, but she kind of wondered about why they would do this. So this is bees on, I don't know what they're on exactly.
I think the question was, I think it was blackberry?
Yeah, or
Does that sound
something
right?
like that. Yeah.
Yep. Or maybe raspberry. It's hard to, I'm not the plant person. I'll yield to Elizabeth on that one. However, this is a swarm of honeybees. This is very common in the spring. This is how honeybee hives split and form new hives. The old queen decides it's time to take off. She takes a few thousand workers with her, and then the old workers that are left in the old hive then hatch out a new queen. And usually it's multiple queens, then they fight to the death, and the winner takes over the hive.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
Always
cool.
have to end it with some kind of violence or a bodily function.
Okay, so you have an
Makes for
ID
good
question.
entertainment.
Yes, it does. Move on.
Yours are just boring.
Yeah.
This is a Wahoo viewer who wants to know if we know what this little weed is. She calls them curly, and they have little blue flowers, and they want to know what that is and what to do about it.
That is unfortunately Creeping Charlie, and that is a perennial and incredibly difficult to control because it spreads by stolons. If it's in a lawn, the best product you can use, again, fall applications, healthy turf first. Fall applications of a product includes triclopyr or 2,4-D, probably most effective. Spring applications aren't very effective. If it's in a garden setting, pulling them as often as you can, glove of death again. That's really difficult in a garden setting. It's hard enough in a lawn, but almost impossible in a garden.
All right, thank you, Zach. Amy, this is a viewer who is really a little worried about their red raspberries. This is a Lincoln viewer, actually. They think the flowers don't really look very normal. They look a little small. And then actually another viewer sent in an image of foliage that looks a little odd. So I don't know if you're seeing this or if it's simply environmental.
A lot of it is environmental. There is a raspberry virus that I have seen a few times where we're going to get some chlorosis and mottling of the leaves. But a lot of that picture right there, that might be a virus issue associated with it. I would wait and see what the new foliage looks like. If the new foliage is also showing the exact same symptoms, it's most likely a virus. If the new foliage, as it starts popping out, is nice and green, it's an environmental issue. And with this cooler weather, we're seeing a lot of yellowing of the leaves. And that might also explain why the flowers are small this year too, because of a really cool weather. We're not warming up as fast. So just wait, give it some time, and see what happens.
All right, thanks, Amy. Elizabeth, this is an Omaha viewer that has this flower ground cover in kind of a wooded area or a lightly shaded area. They want to know what it is, and then the question really is how to control it. Because yeah, you can see it up there now. And they're saying at present they're pulling up all of the sprouts, and they don't know whether they want some but not all.
That's right. More than likely it's the woodland anemone, Anemone canadensis. It is one of the more aggressive ones, and it does spread fairly rapidly. So when it comes to control, I know Zach's favorite thing is the glove of death. You could do it that way too. You can pull it up. Also, just trying to minimize where it's at in the garden too. You're going to want to try some of those things. So you can try to pull it up all you want, but more than likely you're going to have to maybe try something a little more severe to get good control on it.
All right, we have a grub question or 2 or 3 or 5, Wayne. This is a Crete viewer, but we also have some from other parts of the state. They're wondering about preventative grub treatment to tall fescue.
Yes, that is
Yes.
something you can do.
Okay.
If you're going to be applying that, we generally recommend a little bit later this month. Something that includes imidacloprid in the product. The pictures you see flashing up on the screen are the annual white grub or masked chafer. These are the ones where have the random hair pattern on the back end that I mentioned 2 weeks ago.
There we go again.
And are these
For
the
your
June
benefit,
bugs?
Zach.
Yeah, these are June bugs. No.
No.
No, July bugs.
Phylophaga is the June bug, and there's a wide variety of species on those.
All right, excellent. So about time for grub.
Yeah, just to point out though, tall fescue roots is a little bit deeper rooted than Kentucky bluegrass, has more roots than Kentucky bluegrass. And even though we normally don't see white grub damage on the tall fescue, they're still there, and the skunks and the raccoons will still come in. And so even though you probably won't see, almost never see white grub damage in tall fescue, it's the secondary damage that's brutal.
All right, thank you, Zach. You also have an image. This is a viewer that has a question about a weed in her roses or in her garden, and she's one. And I think we can kind of describe it in there in the middle there, the pointy thing.
It's the it's the thinly leafed one that
Yeah.
looks like pale dock, I believe, which is a perennial broadleaf weed, and again, Elizabeth's glove of death. Or that one you can cut out. That one I don't believe spreads by rhizomes or stones, but you can cut that one or rogue that one out, dig that one out.
Right,
Pretty
cut or
effectively.
dig.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Zach. Amy, this is a viewer in Omaha. They planted an espresso Kentucky coffee tree 3 years ago, which is the male, doing very well, but looks like it has a bleeding canker. They've cleaned it. The wound is brown and bleeding again. They want to do if there is anything that can be done to save this particular tree.
There's really nothing you can do at this point in time. You would have been better leaving it alone. The minute you started cutting away at that canker, you actually removed a portion of the tree that's moving the water and the nutrients to that part of the tree. And so you're actually going to start seeing dieback on that half of the branch because there's no water movement. All the water movement is actually right underneath that bark. It isn't on the inside of that trunk. So when you're cutting it out, you just really did some major damage to your tree. With a bleeding canker, you're better off just leaving it alone. As long as the integrity of the tree is still good and the tree doesn't look like it's going to fall, just leave it alone. And if you're concerned that maybe the integrity in the heartwood is starting to rot, quick, easy method to check is take a long drill bit and drill it into that tree. If you hit it a certain way and all of a sudden that drill bit goes, whoom, you're pretty rotten in the inside and you need to remove it. If it's still pretty solid and you go in about an inch or two, you can leave the tree alone for a while. I know you just created a wound and you can get secondary issues, but it's one quick way to check.
All right, excellent.
Or another thing is to contact a certified arborist to have them come out and take a look at your tree, and they can tell you whether or not the structural integrity of the tree is there and if there's any issues further on down the road.
Right, don't want that falling on anybody or anything. All right, Elizabeth, talking about trees, this is a viewer in south central Nebraska. They have a newly planted bur oak. This one actually is wanting to go north. And they're wondering how to straighten it. Should they brace it? Should they prune it? Will it straighten up? It is in full sun.
As long as it has a strong central leader, I'd go ahead and leave it. The hard part with trying to straighten it up is getting the braces on, and then you have to pull the top back, and more than likely you'll do some damage to the tree, whether or not it gets snapped off or things along those lines. So with time, it's either going to straighten itself up or it's going to try to compensate for leaning that way. So just make sure that as it does age, that it doesn't continue to lean or that angle gets less and less on that one side. So just watch it with as it gets older.
Patience, it'll learn to stand up straight. All right, Wayne, this is a Lincoln viewer who wonders why they haven't seen any lightning bugs.
My guess is that it's been too cold.
I saw one last night.
Yes,
One.
I've been watching. I'm on a couple, one listserv that has a lot of insect information coming across. Iowa's have not been seeing them yet either. So just too cool. Give it time. Let it warm up. Get some heat and some moisture going. We should be seeing them. And then I'm going to take the opportunity now. We had 2 weeks ago.
Right.
We had the giant silkworm moths on. We had a couple different pictures, and we had a viewer think that they should be called silk moths. Now they're talking about a separate group within the moths. What we were talking about were the family Saturniidae, that's the giant silkworm moths, and then what they were referring to were the Ombicidae, just plain silk moths.
Okay, so different creatures entirely.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Okay, Zach, you actually have 2 questions that involve vinegar. One of them is a Springfield viewer who wonders whether vinegar sprayed on the seedlings will kill them.
Okay, next question. Is that the end of the question? Okay. Vinegar sprayed on seeds won't kill them, but vinegar sprayed on seedlings could, depending on the rate. And yeah, it's.
The
I
really
probably would
heavy stuff.
avoid. Yeah, I probably would avoid that. Yeah.
Okay. Or do it if you want to, but it has to be a high rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the second one is a gallon of vinegar a cup of table salt and 2 teaspoons of Dawn a good substitute for Roundup, for glyphosate?
No.
Okay, good lightning. Why not?
Yeah,
Why not?
all these concoctions, whether they're passed down through generations or from Jerry Baker or whoever, those are pretty questionable and way, way, way off label.
Okay, all right.
Period.
Thank you, Zach. Let's see. Amy, this is an Omaha viewer that treated an oak for iron chlorosis last week. Now they're noticing what appears to be rust on the backs of the leaves. Would this be related to the chlorosis treatment?
It wouldn't be related to the chlorosis treatment. Rust on the back of the leaf.
Stumped?
That one has me stumped. A picture would be great. I would be curious as you watch it, does that rust, pustule, or that discoloration move to the top part of the leaf? Different components like that. A follow-up, I'll continue to watch it, go from there, but it has nothing to do with the iron chlorosis treatment whatsoever.
All right, thanks, Amy. Excuse me. Elizabeth, this is a viewer with a thornless honey locust from Bolus, Nebraska. Branches hang over and it's been dropping something all over the place. Has to sweep it off every day. They're wondering if what it is, and is this harmful to the container plants or to the birds?
More than likely, it is the tiny little flowers that are just falling off because it's completed the flowering. The flowers don't look like much. They're just little, looks like little catkins hanging off of there. It's not harmful. Just don't park underneath it, and then you don't have to worry about it. And if you have bird baths and things like that, just clean them out on a regular basis.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. All right, from Primrose, Nebraska, Wayne, we have cherries and peaches. They want to know the best time to spray for insects, and the fruit is already forming.
Fruit's already forming. It's time to get out there and start spraying. They do have fruit tree spray schedules out there.
Okay.
I highly recommend finding one that's for our area and going with that.
All right.
And if it's cherries, I'm going to chime in here. If you're going to spray them, I would also be looking at a fungicide application for brown rot. If we continue with this wet pattern, especially on your cherries, you're going to end up with a lot of brown rot. So look at an insecticide-fungicide combination with that.
Excellent, thank you, Amy. Zach, weeds in a daffodil bed, which is not turf.
It's unfortunately, yes.
Okay. She's wondering whether she can spray something like glyphosate over the top of that after the foliage has died completely back, or will the bulbs continue to take that up?
Yeah, after the foliage has died completely back, Roundup should be fine as long as if the weeds aren't there any longer or they're not green, then it doesn't make sense. But the daffodils, it should they'll die off, or the leaves will be gone fairly early in the summer, and so you can use Roundup over the top of that,
All
or
right.
glyphosate over the top, not vinegar.
All right, and Amy, speaking of brown rot, Fremont viewer has pie cherries. They're normally good. Now they have brown stripes. They're disfigured and they're not perfectly round, and there's no evidence of insects.
I would actually lean toward environmental with that.
Oh, Okay.
cooler weather. Typically, brown rot's going to infect. It's not going to cause streaks or cause a distortion of the fruit. You're going to see that nice brown fuzzy growth on that fruit. So I would probably go more environmental at this point in time. It should be okay to eat. Just try a few, and if they don't taste good, go to farmer's market.
All right, thanks. Very quickly, Elizabeth, we have a viewer who has a magnolia overgrown. They want to make it smaller, and they want to do this by cutting half of the bottom branches off to make it look more like a tree. Is this a good idea?
Most of the time when we're talking pruning, we're talking about removing no more than a third of the foliage at any one point in time. So with time, you can get it up there, but no more than a third of the lower foliage this year. And then next year, if you want to go a little higher, you could do that as well.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth.